We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It is Wednesday, the first day of June, 6:44 a.m. Just got off work. Pretty chill night. Got to go in tonight for overtime. Making that money, the boss asked me, so I figured I'd go in. As far as updates, that's about it. Let's get on with the show. Now, this was brought to my attention from a channel called High Impact Flicks. And I knew about Waco, about how our government killed its own people during Waco, which was a sad day. Terrible thing. The Branch Davidians, which I would like to do an episode on that one day. But this was something I had never heard about, so I figured I'd share it with you all. The day Philadelphia bombed its own people, an oral history of the 1985 police bombing that changed the city forever. As the smoke rose from 6221 Osage Avenue, Philadelphia residents watched through their windows or television screens in a state of stunned disbelief. Their city had just bombed its own people. On the evening of May 13, 1985, long-standing tensions between MOVE, a black liberation group, and the Philadelphia Police Department erupted horrifically. That night, the city of Philadelphia dropped a satchel bomb, a demolition device typically used in combat, laced with Tovex and C4 explosives on the MOVE organization, who were living in a West Philadelphia row home known to be occupied by men, women, and children. It went up in unextinguishable flames. 11 people were killed, including 5 children and the founder of the organization. 61 homes were destroyed, and more than 250 citizens were left homeless. For the next several years, the confrontation with MOVE would be remembered as an ordeal that transformed the fabric of the city. The show of force, unjustified to many, solidified mistrust between Philadelphia's residents and government. The story is a parable of sorts. It is a parable of how the unthinkable comes to happen, says Jason Oster, the director of Let the Fire Burn, a documentary about the bombing. It's a tragedy, in my opinion. Everyone who was an adult in the city failed that day. Collectively, the whole city failed. MOVE, not an acronym, was a political and religious organization whose principles were anti-government, anti-technology, and anti-corporation. I ain't gonna lie, that sounds pretty dope to me. Its creator, John Africa, born Vincent Leaphart, I didn't know if it was a PH or a Leap Heart, was a West Philadelphia native and Korean War veteran whose ideology combined with black revolutionary ideas with environmental and animal rights, as well as a back to nature movement. MOVE was founded in 1972 and still exists today. Though its membership numbers are unknown, members lived communally and described themselves as a family, changing their last names to Africa, out of reverence for their founder and for the continent. In nonviolent but disruptive demonstrations, members protested at zoos, pet stores, and political rallies. The group believed in composting, homeschooling, and a diet of raw foods, and spoke out against war and police brutality. They maintained a complicated relationship with Philadelphia residents. Some sympathized with their mission, while others found their lifestyle to be disruptive. Members frequently had run-ins with authorities. In 1978, MOVE engaged in a 15-month standoff after then-Mayor Frank Rizzo, notorious for his volatile relationship with black residents and activist groups, ordered the group to be removed from their home. The confrontation ended in the death of a police officer, for which 9 members of MOVE, nicknamed the MOVE 9, were controversially convicted and given life sentences. 4 years later, MOVE relocated to the quiet, largely middle-class African-American residence on Osage Avenue. Their neighbors continually complained to the city about trash around their row house, confrontations with residents, and that MOVE members broadcast sometimes obscene political messages by bullhorn. After they'd spent 3 years on Osage Avenue, then Mayor Wilson Goode, the first African American mayor of Philadelphia, gave the order to evict them. What began as a door-to-door evacuation of the neighborhood that night before became a violent, day-long ordeal no one in the community could have foreseen. Only 2 people survived the bombing: Ramona Africa, then 29, and a child, Birdie Africa, then 13. Later known as Michael Moses Ward, both were badly burned. Despite 2 grand jury investigations, a civil suit, and a commission final report that cited the bombing as reckless, ill-conceived, and hastily approved, no one was ever criminally charged for the attack. Survivor Ramona Africa immediately went on to serve 7 years in prison on rioting and conspiracy charges for arrest warrants from before the bombing. Neighbors returned to shoddy construction in 1986, and by the early 2000s, 2/3 of the neighborhood was bought out by the city. Today the houses are largely vacant. The bombing, now deemed one of the worst tragedies in the history of Philadelphia, lives on in memories of the city's residents. A few years later, the Waco siege standoff between law enforcement and a Texas religious sect would sear itself into the country's consciousness. The MOVE bombing remains largely forgotten nationally. Based on testimonies, interviews, and retellings from then and now by people who lived it, here's the tale of how the fateful tragedy unfolded and changed Philadelphia forever. Some quotes have been condensed for clarity. Diane J., a resident of the neighborhood. I went to hang out at the home of my friends-in-laws that day. It was a beautiful day outside, a beautiful neighborhood. They were out of town, and we went to watch the dog. We got there early and hadn't been in the house very long. The police knocked on the door and told us everyone had to leave. There was a swarm of police officers outside. We had no idea what was going on. They told us it was an investigation of the MOVE people on the block over, and we could come back later. So we took the dog and left. Akin Wilson. then a next-door neighbor of Move. The cops evacuated our block the night before. A lot of families went to shelters or hotels. My dad took us to a condo he started renting that week. Because my parents were through with the situation, we took stuff to stay overnight and left everything else in the house. Andrea Walls, writer and resident of the neighborhood. That morning there was an announcement the police commissioner made over a bullhorn. I'll never forget it. Gregor Sambor, the Philadelphia police commissioner, in testimony. With the bullhorn I read the message. Ramona Africa, lone adult survivor of bombing. In 2015 interview with Press TV. Police Commissioner Gregor Sambor came out and said, "Attention, move. This is America. You have to abide by the laws and rules of the United States." Words to that effect. I'm still trying to figure out what he meant by that. After they made that announcement, they didn't just try to wait us out or anything. What was the hurry? Albert Revel, then Philadelphia police sergeant, in testimony. The tactical plan, as I understood it was to remove the Move people, all the people from the house safely, by causing a diversion on the roof, inserting the insertion teams on either side of the properties, and by then inducing an amount of CS gas in a sufficient concentration to make those people come out of the house. Ramona Africa, lone adult survivor of the bombing, in a 2010 interview with Angela News. They aimed 4 water cannons at our home. We were all in the basement and the water was just pouring down on us for the longest time. Mind you, this is when there was no fire at all. Michael Moses Ward, lone child survivor, also known as Birdie Africa, in testimony. We was in the cellar for a while, and tear gas started coming in, and we got the blankets, and they was wet, and then we put them over our heads and started laying down. Angie Lofton, a resident of the neighborhood. I went to work and turned on the news. I saw clouds of tear gas and the gunfire started. It was rapid fire. I couldn't believe it. I had heard the Move kids were supposed to be picked up by authorities at Cobbs Creek Parkway before any action was supposed to happen. It was horrifying to know that they were still in the house. Wilson Good, then mayor of Philadelphia, during a press conference. There was no way to avoid it, no way to extract ourselves from that situation except by armed confrontation. William Brown III, chair of the Special Investigation Move Commission. It was clear that the Move people didn't have any automatic weapons. They later found only a couple of shotguns and a rifle in the Move house. Yet the police fired so many rounds of ammunition, at least 10,000, into that building during that day, that they had to send up the police headquarters to get more. Andrea Walls, writer and resident of the neighborhood. How could they decide to fire 10,000 rounds of ammunition into a building with women and children? It was absolutely insane. Ron Archer, a resident of the neighboring block. Helicopters were everywhere. I was standing at the corner, and I climbed on top of the mailbox so I could see it better. I saw a bomb drop, then it felt like someone had pushed me. Michael Moses Ward, also known as Birdie Africa. That's when the big bomb went off. It shook the whole house up. Arnett Woodall, a resident and current store owner in the neighborhood. We were playing basketball at a recreational center in the area when the explosion went off. It shook the ground. Gregor Sambor, then Philadelphia police commissioner, in testimony. I had recommended that the best way was to use an explosive entry device to blow a hole in the roof to insert gas in through the roof, and also to dislodge the bunker. Frank Powell, retired Philadelphia police lieutenant known for dropping the bomb, in a 1985 interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer. The bunker was not destroyed. There was a hole in the roof, a football-shaped hole about 1 foot wide, 2 feet long. I looked down in the hole. There was no fire and no smoke. About 15 to 20 minutes later, I started to receive information about the stakeout post that there was a fire. Ramona, Africa, lone adult survivor of the bombing. We felt the house shake, but it hadn't occurred to us that they dropped a bomb. Pretty quickly, it got smokier and smokier. At first, we thought it was the tear gas, but then it got thicker. It started getting hot in there. The house was on fire. Michael Africa Jr., MOVE member and son of Debbie and Michael Africa Sr. I was living with my grandmother at the time. We were 4 miles away, but I could see the black smoke in the sky as if it was down the street. I went in and saw my grandmother and aunts watching the news. They were all huddled up together and they were all crying. I looked at the TV and I said, "That looks like our house." And my aunt looked at me and said, "It is." Akin Wilson, the next door neighbor of MOVE. We watched the bombing on TV at the condo. Our house started to go up in flames. I went out on the balcony and I could see the smoke billowing across the city. Angie Lofton, a resident of the neighborhood. At the back of our house, the kids playing in the yards were yelling, "Ouch, ouch," because they were getting singed from the ash falling. Wilson Good, the mayor of Philadelphia. You can always second guess any decision. The one thing we did that went wrong was when the percussion grenade was dropped, it caused a fire. That was an accident. I was as saddened by that as anyone else. Diane J., a resident of the neighborhood. We went to my friend's house, and later that day we saw the bombing on the news. We were devastated. I was angry, heartbroken. It was a beautiful home. They were travelers. They had things that were priceless, and they lost everything. Everything. Angie Lofton, a resident of the neighborhood. Everyone's question at the time was why weren't they putting the fire out? They were just going to let the fire burn. Later, we'd find out that the police commissioner and the fire commissioner agreed to use it as a tactical plan. William Brown III, chair of the Special Investigation MOVE Commission. We were told by the experts that when the fire first started, you could have put it out with a bucket of water. Andrea Walls, writer and resident of the neighborhood. The building is on fire with firemen on the scene, and everyone agrees not to fight the fire and to allow 60 homes to burn. How can this happen? How could no one say, "Wait, hold up, something's not right"? Y'all are serving misdemeanor warrants, and this is where we end up at the end of the day? What does it mean? For years I've been trying to understand, and I came to the conclusion that we have all been absorbing all of this anti-black rhetoric, all of this anti-black imagery, our entire lives. We are just all absorbing this expectation that black life and black bodies have very little value. Angie Lofton, a resident of the neighborhood. It started spreading only 2 blocks from where we lived. I stay awake that night praying it wouldn't spread to ours. James Bergier, retired Philadelphia police officer. In 2010 interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer. That's the closest I've ever been to a large fire. The heat would pop the glass. You couldn't interpret if it was a gunshot or not. We heard over the radio that they were coming out. Ramona, Africa, lone adult survivor of the bombing. We immediately tried to get our children, our animals, and ourselves out of the burning building. We were hollering, "We're coming out!" The cops immediately started shooting, trying to prevent anybody from coming out of that house. We were forced back in at least twice. William Brown III, chairperson of the Special Investigation MOVE Commission. Police officers denied using gunfire, though it is unclear why MOVE members would choose to run back into the fire. James Bergier, retired Philadelphia police officer. Out of the smoke, the first person I saw was Ramona. Then I see who was later identified as Bertie come out of the fire. I ran out and scooped him underneath his left arm. Angie Lofton, a resident of the neighborhood. I had never seen anything like it. I had seen the Vietnam War coverage on TV, but never my neighborhood in flames. When I watered the plants the day after the bombing, they had burn holes. Diane J., a resident of the neighborhood. I didn't know until later there were people still in the MOVE house. I didn't know that my friend's husband, who was a MOVE member, was killed in that fire. Debbie Africa, member of MOVE 9, released from prison in 2018. A prison guard came to our cells and told Janine, Janet, and Sue, "They just had a firebombing at your house and your children are dead." I don't blame her because it was her job to tell us, but we couldn't believe it. It was just horrible and unbelievable. Michael Africa Sr., member of MOVE 9, released from prison in 2018. Even while watching the footage, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable something like that could happen, that a government would do that to its own people. Akin Wilson, then a next-door neighbor of MOVE in 86. In 86, it was a 180-degree turn. The neighbors were all excited to get back into our homes and back to the new normal. There were a lot of people displaced during that time. People returned with hope. They took tragedy and learned from it. Ron Archer, a resident of the neighboring block. The stab to the heart was when the buyout happened, when the old people left. I want to say that 90% of those people took it. It was a close-knit community. Diane J., a resident of the neighborhood. Folks just moved on from the community because it was easier, but the memories will always be there. Gerald Renfo, a resident on the block, in 2019 interview with WHYY. My hope is that it will be once again a beautiful community, and maybe once again we can be extended family. We'll be getting to know our new neighbors. They'll be getting to know us. Arnett Woodall, a resident and store owner in the neighborhood. We must rebuild and remember that day. We must remember the children who died and the lives that were lost. It is a black eye on the city. We can let them never forget. But that's the story of the MOVE bombing. Figured since that was a decent amount of time, but not long enough, I don't think, for a full episode. figured I'd share a recent news story that was brought to my attention from Jacob Israel. Um, Now, this is a discovery that was made in the bottom of the ocean of a yellow brick road. Now, the people who discovered it are saying it's a natural occurrence. I disagree. Well, not so much that I disagree, because I'm not an archaeologist or whatever that would be called, but I have a theory that it's an actual brick road from an older civilization. And I'll show a picture of it too, so you all can see it. And I don't know, I'll just share it with this article with you. Let's see, weird yellow brick road discovered at bottom of the ocean. Ocean explorers have found a natural volcanic structure deep underwater that has the appearance of a mythical man-made road. The underwater structure was discovered by a marine scientist aboard the exploration vessel EV Nautilus, who were using a remotely operated vehicle to peek at underwater structures known as seamounts, mountains formed by volcanic activity. Specifically, their mission called, and I am not going to try to pronounce that. It sounds like it's in Hawaii. I'll try to. Lua Hiki Ke Kumu expedition is the study of the Lili Ukalani Ridge seamounts in Hawaii. Their aim is to investigate a split in the Seamount Trail, which has puzzled scientists. The origin of thousands of seamounts in the central and western Pacific region is yet to be fully understood. The scientists document their research live, which includes releasing video footage from the remote vehicles sent to the seabed. In one clip posted to YouTube, the scientists are seen observing geological formations and picking up rocks with a robotic arm. At one point, the scientists stumble across a pattern of cracks in the seabed that strongly resemble a man-made brick road, with the distinct rectangular blocks separated from one another via straight lines and right angles. The formation stands out distinctly from the relatively formless seabed around it. One of the scientists says it's the road to Atlantis. Another calls it the Yellow Brick Road, from the children's novel The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The more likely answer is that the rock formation is actually an example of ancient active volcanic geology. According to the video description posted by the EV Nautilus YouTube channel, at the summit of Nootka Seamount, the team spotted a dried lake bed formation, now ID'd as a fractured flow of hyaloclastite rock, a volcanic rock formed in high-energy eruptions where many rock fragments settle to the seabed. The description adds that the unique pattern of fractures in the rock that give it its cobbled formation is probably the result of repeated heating and cooling over time due to multiple volcanic eruptions. The underwater road is not the only notable finding by the EV Nautilus team so far this year. Back in March, they released a clip which can be seen at the top of this article of a toothy anglerfish hanging out on some rocks over 1,000 meters, 3,280 feet deep. "Oh, look at his little face," one of the scientists says as the remote vehicle zooms in on the animal to reveal its sharp teeth and spiky exterior. This anglerfish, first identified as a batfish, was recorded on video over 1,000 meters deep and has hands down the coolest facial expression underwater, the video description reads. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Let me know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube and you see the actual picture of the road, if you think it's man-made, maybe an ancient road, or if you think it's made by volcanoes.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.